Our first key feature for CLO 7.2 is enhanced modular capabilities and workflow. So as you can see here, I have the new modular library window open. I'm going to go through how we can easily create and add in new style blocks within it. So as you see here, we've got a dress style like any ordinary project. And to create a new modular block from this, we just need to go to File, Save as, Style. Now when you select that, this new modular creator will come up. So you can decide to use any of the groups that you see here, or you can use the plus icon to bring in your own group. This will then browse your computer finder where you can select the folder to bring in. And once you do have it there, simply select it, and then we can move on to the rest, beginning with category. So within category, you can organize this however you want. You could bring together shirts, dresses, pants, outerwear, or you can organize it more creatively with categories like fit and flare that you see here in my modular creator. But now I'll create a brand new category and I'll call it webinar for today's demonstration. Then just select OK, and once you've got the category you want, simply double click and move on to style. So for style, I'm going to be creating the dress that you see here, and when you first select add, it's going to automatically generate a thumbnail. You can give it a name, and you can also use your own thumbnail that you've created. I'll do that now and use a schematic render and select OK. So now I have my dress, I've named it. Now I just need to select, double click and move on to adding the blocks. So once we get to block, you've got the option to open presets, you can save and press the plus icon to add new blocks, which I'll do now. Let's see what that's all about. So to create a new block, you'll find type and a drop-down list. So what you want to do is simply scroll through and find the block that most closely matches your pattern, and in the tag below you are able to rename it if you want to. And then just select OK and continue to go through and add as many blocks as you need for your style. And if you do make a mistake, you can just press delete. So we've got all of the blocks ready for the style now. Let's go ahead and start creating. So the OK button is grayed out. You need to select the block that you would like to create first. Your pattern is then going to be outlined, and you need to select all patterns that belong to that particular block. So for my particular pattern, that's including those 3 pattern pieces together. And here I can rename it. It'll automatically generate a thumbnail image, and you can use your own as well. So then you simply need to go through the process of selecting a block, identifying it by selecting it in the 2D window, pressing enter to confirm it, and then you'll notice those ticks coming along the side of each block as it has been successfully added. And once you have gone through and created all of the blocks, you will now be able to select OK. And when you do, you'll get this warning to check your sewing taglines. Note that if you need to make a lot of corrections to your sewing, you will need to cancel and go back to the beginning and modify your sewing. But otherwise, you just want to go through, check all of your sewing connections are correct. And when you're satisfied, press OK. So if we now take a look in the new modular library, here is the dress and all of the pattern blocks we just created. So what I can do now that I've got all of these blocks set up is I can modify the pattern that I have here and create a brand new block. So I'm going to use my style line tools to add a little bit of length here, perhaps just a little bit of swing, just to demonstrate. And then simulate those changes. I have a new skirt style, and I can save this out as a new block. Press the plus icon, and then again, select the relevant pattern. OK, and then always, of course, checking the sewing tags. All looks good. And just repeat again, pressing the plus icon to add the back skirt. That looks good. And once again, checking the sewing tags. So now we have a brand new front and back skirt block. But what if you want to create a lot of blocks together again from a brand new style? You can easily do that as well. So let's bring in a totally new garment. It is a compatible pattern with the dress style 1 that we have been working with. So here I have a range of styles that all fit together with dress style 1. All I need to do to add these to my block library is press the plus icon, and then I'll be prompted to go through and select each of the relevant blocks just like before. Pressing enter once you've made your selection, and updating the thumbnail if you would like to do that, updating the name tag if you would like to do that. As you can see, I'm just going to go through and confirm it as it is, selecting each block in turn. Finally, the front and the back skirts. And OK. And we'll now be prompted to, of course, check our sewing. And as I mentioned before, if your sewing is incorrect, you will need to go back to the beginning, check your sewing as usual. But mine looks good. So now we have all of those blocks have now been added to dress style 1, and I can bring them into the workspace, mix and match things just by double clicking them. As you saw before, you can continue to modify the style, add it to your block library. But as you can see, if you mix and match pieces of different lengths like this skirt, your result is not going to be beautiful. So be mindful, your pattern blocks do need to be compatible, but it's really easy and intuitive to use the new Modular Creator. So hopefully this adds a lot of benefit to your workflow. I am very excited to share with you that soft body is one of our key features for 7.2.
So as you know, in previous versions, the avatar retained its original shape, even around tightening points like elastic waistbands. But now in 7.2, you can express more realism when the body is being compressed by garments with shrinkage, such as waistbands, underwear, and swimwear. So let's take a look at this feature and I'll explain what it is and how you can use it. First, the soft body feature only responds when the avatar is wearing a garment that would ordinarily affect its body shape, like this swimwear outfit with elastic I have here. And it's just like fabric simulation, it's also going to be affected by gravity, which is pretty cool. And one thing to note that is only currently available for our adult avatars. So let's dive in and take a look at this feature, what it is and how you can use it. So first, just select your avatar, and now in its surface properties, you'll find the option to toggle on soft body simulation. And when you toggle this on, you'll now have the soft body stiffness settings sliding bar. So the default is 7,000. And this stiffness value allows you to adjust the responsiveness of the body to pressure, with lower values allowing the body to be more easily affected by pressure and larger values allowing the body to be less affected by pressure. It also responds differently in different areas of the body, just like the human form. So the bust, abdomen and thighs are more responsive and more soft, whereas areas like the shoulders are going to be less affected by pressure and allow you to express things like elastic realistically to the human form. As I mentioned, the default stiffness is 7,000, the max is 10,000 and the minimum is 5,000, so feel free to play around with those ranges. But let's take a look at how this responds with our fit maps on. When you first simulate, you will see that the soft body mesh is being calculated, and note this could take longer for larger body types or more complex garments. But once the calculation is complete, we'll be able to see how the body and clothing both respond to each other and to gravity as well. So here we can see that the area around the waist is responding now to the waistband, and we can see the difference in our strain map for our waistband as well. So the garment is responding in turn. Note that at the moment it is difficult to accurately assess the fit using this feature, so we do recommend that it's used to create more realistic body expression for purposes like content making. Now let's look at different stiffness values and how that affects the avatar and the garment's responsiveness. So bringing this down to a minimum of 5,000, I'll simulate. We can see the body is now responding with more softness around that waist area. If I bring it up to a maximum of 10,000, resimulate, we see a rebound and the body is now more stiff around that waistband area. Now do note you've got a little icon down the bottom here just to give you an indication that the soft body feature has been enabled, and yes, you can use it on more than one avatar. Now if you do want to go back to the original avatar with the rigid body, you can toggle this off and you can see the avatar returns to its original shape. Just note that you will need to resimulate the garment to allow it to redrape to the new revised body form. A couple of notes. If you do open the avatar editor window when the soft body is applied, you will see this warning that soft body simulation will be turned off. This is because to resize the avatar, the soft body calculation needs to be redone. So it's recommended that you resize your avatar and then apply the soft body simulation. Now, a couple of more things to note on soft body. If you do have it enabled, you'll not be able to use it in recording your animations at the moment. If you do attempt to simulate or to record an animation, you'll receive this warning message, which lets you know it's only available in simulation mode, but this is a feature that will be available in future releases so that you can use it in animation mode as well. And when we are in simulation mode, at the moment it's also not available for GPU simulation, only for fitting accurate fabric as well as normal simulation modes. So if you do attempt to use the GPU, just like in animation mode, you'll receive this warning message. And again, this is something that will be included in future releases.
Now here's a feature I know a lot of you are going to be really excited about. From 7.2, we now have camera animation. So let's jump into animation mode and see what this feature is all about. So before I begin, you can use camera animation even if your avatar doesn't have any motion applied or there's no garment animation. But today I am using a pre-recorded motion file to create a bit more of a dynamic video for the webinar. And you can see the recorded information down here as the red bars in the timeline. Now, before we dive in, it is useful to briefly talk about keyframes, which are important to how to work with this feature. So as you might already know, animations are made by merging together lots of still frames to create a video. So if you have specific information you want to show on a particular frame, like the camera position, we call it a keyframe. And you can see that I have 192 frames here, and that is also indicated by the blue bar down below in my timeline. And one last little thing to point out before I kick off is these brand new icons here, which allow you to animate the camera, and I'll be going over what these are and how you can use them.
So there's a couple of ways that we can work with camera animation, and the first is to use the 3D viewer to frame the camera and add keyframes. So first of all, bring your playhead to around the area you want it, and then you can type directly into the timeline toolbar as well to set your keyframes. Now use the 3D viewer to navigate to the camera view you would like, and then in the toolbar using the icon here to your left, add replace camera keyframes, click it once, and notice that we now have an item in our timeline for camera, and we have this green keyframe indicating we've just animated our camera. Pretty easy, right? So now I'll just go ahead and create some more keyframes just so you get a good idea of how this works. Moving the playhead, adjusting my 3D viewer, and then pressing the little icon to add my keyframes. If I press play, we can see my camera has been animated. So that's method one. The second way that you can work with camera animation is to move the camera yourself. So to do that, you click this icon for Camera Viewfinder. Then we get the camera preview, and if you zoom out, we now can see the camera in our 3D viewer. So the camera preview does as the name suggests, and it is showing us a preview of what the camera is looking at. And if we navigate around in the 3D window, notice that it's no longer setting the camera view, but we do have this green line indicating where the camera is pointing and this blue dot, which we'll call the aim point. And you can think of this as the focus of the camera, which right now is pointing at the avatar's waist. Now, some of you might already be wondering, how can you set the aspect ratio for your camera? Notice that the preview here has a portrait aspect ratio. So this is linked to the render window and the image settings there. Of course, that's where we would render out the final product. So you can move this preview window wherever you like. So I'll move that over there and come into the render window and directly into the image settings. Notice as you change the size, it immediately updates your camera preview. So you can set your aspect ratio to whatever you would like. And then once you're finished, just close that off. And you can also resize and, as you saw, reposition the camera preview wherever you would like it.
Now let's talk about how you can adjust that aim point I mentioned earlier, or that little blue dot. So we already have some keyframes set up, and I'm still in Camera Viewfinder, which means I can manipulate the camera directly to change the keyframe. So click on it once and you will receive the gizmo and make the adjustments. And notice that as I change it, it is still pointing directly at the avatar. So if I move the playhead a little up, make a new adjustment with my camera, it will automatically create that keyframe down below. And if you would like to adjust where it's aiming, you can do that as well. Just click on that blue dot. Again, you get the handy gizmo and you can adjust where the camera is focused. Really easy, right? Now you can also move your camera position and aim point together. Click the camera and notice this little icon here. Click it once and it's going to group them. So now I have a gizmo that will move the aim point and the camera position together. So far, so good. All right, let's now look at the property editor and explain a little bit about our camera properties. So the first item you can see here is frame, and it's showing us our current frame. We have a keyframe for our camera and it's the current position of our playhead. Now you can move the camera keyframe by typing in any value here. So if I change this from 111 to say 130, notice that that has repositioned the keyframe. Now you can also adjust your camera's position with the sliders here. So if you want to make some more fine adjustments, you can come into your properties or you can use the gizmo and you can do the same thing again with the camera aim, and notice that your camera preview all the while is showing you the view results. So however you're comfortable, you can adjust your camera position and aim here in the properties or with the gizmo. Now, one final icon I need to show you is our camera path. So when we turn the visibility on, we now see this blue line in our 3D viewer, and this is the path our camera is taking based on those keyframes that we set up. And we can see each of those keyframes because they're indicated by the little blue points here along the camera's path. Now you can also see how your camera is traveling by clicking on the keyframes. It's going to snap to those little blue dots. And if you just scrub through the timeline, it's going to show how the camera is traveling between those keyframes. So two more things to point out in the camera property editor. First of all is this item called straight track. So going to a keyframe, toggling this on, this will now show you that you have taken a straight path between these two keyframes rather than a curved path. Then you can see here in the camera preview, if I come back and toggle that off to compare, we can see the different results. So this enables you to take a direct straight path rather than a natural curve, and you'll always know that this is the case because this icon here will be a square rather than a circle. And then we have keep continuity. So toggling this off, notice that I now have no path between these two keyframes, and it's also there displayed in the 3D viewer. And so by toggling this off, you're able to create camera effects like jump cuts, as you can see. Okay, so now let's talk about editing our keyframes. A few ways to do it. First of all, you want to have your keyframe selected, and then you can update it here in the properties, or if you've got the camera viewfinder on, you can work directly by moving the camera in the 3D viewer. If you have camera viewfinder off, again, just make sure that you have your keyframe selected, and then you can use the Add Replace to update your keyframe, and those changes will be reflected immediately. To move a keyframe, we can do that up in the property editors, which we saw before, but you can also click and drag your keyframe to reposition it directly in the timeline as well. To delete a keyframe, simply right-click it directly in the timeline and delete camera keyframe. And if you need to delete all of your keyframes, perhaps you want to start from scratch, you can do that by right-clicking next to camera in the timeline. And if you select delete, it's going to delete all of the animated keyframes. So that's it for how to use the feature. Now let's talk about saving. So if you've got camera animation data in your project, it's going to save out with your Z project file together with your avatar, garment, and other motion files. But we also have a new file type, which is going to allow you to save and reuse your keyframe animated camera data in other projects. So go to File and Save As, and you'll find camera motion is a new item here, and you can just save it out on your desktop or in your CLO library. I'll just save this as camera, and then you can open as camera motion and apply it to any project file. And we have also given you some presets that you can start working with straight away. So you're going to find some brand new subfolders in your avatars in the CLO library, and you'll have a new folder called Camera Motion. You'll find that for both of our adult avatars, and notice that the names for these camera motions are a match for our avatar motions. So you can bring in the related avatar motion and then the camera motion to match. So to apply this, it's the same as applying a motion. You would just double click it to apply it to your avatar, and to apply the camera, again, just double click it in the library, and notice it's going to bring it into my project and I can start using it straight away. So while you're working out how to create your own custom camera animation, you can start working with these presets straight away. And last but not least, let's talk about how you can output your finished animations. So just like before, you have the option to take a quick capture by going to File, Video Capture, and selecting Animation. And that's just going to give you the basic shaded view that we see in our 3D viewer here. You can set your aspect ratio, press record to record it, and then you can save it out as an MP4 or an AVI. And of course, for those really high quality presentations, you're going to want to render it out by the render window, setting up your lighting environment and your quality settings how you want them, and of course, using animation as your output type. So that is a wrap on camera animation, a fantastic new feature, and I know you're going to have a lot of fun playing with this one.
From CLO 7.2, you can now express elastic more realistically, and you'll find brand new elastics in your fabric library in a new subfolder called Elastic. We have knit and woven presets for you to use. So I'll go ahead and create myself a trim subfolder in my fabric object browser, and then I'll bring in this knit. I'll just drag and drop in this elastic, and we'll apply it to a pattern the same as a fabric. I'm just going to drag and drop it onto my pattern piece. If I zoom in here, you can see that gorgeous realistic structure of the elastic. Now I'll go ahead and add the woven elastic to the object browser as well. This time, drag and drop it onto my waistband. And of course, you are able to customize your elastic according to the design. So for example, let's go ahead and change the color of the elastic and apply that right now. But we can also adjust the stiffness and strength of the elastic. So with my simulation and my fit maps on, if I go into the elastic property editor and play with these settings, you can see where it's becoming more or less tight, indicated by those red areas on my fit map. Now let's go and apply these to our bra straps as well. I'm just going to select those particular pattern pieces and then assign them over in my object browser. Now something that I want to point out here is that the grain line of your elastic pattern must be perpendicular to the length of the elastic or along the weft grain, as you see here. So let's go ahead and update the grain lines for those pattern pieces. Now that looks right. I will go ahead and update the color for my knit elastic as well, so it matches my waistband. Perfect. Now we can also apply elastic to stabilize a seam with binding. So using my binding tool, I'll just go ahead and apply this binding along the length of that leg opening. Simulate to take effect to it. And once it is simulated, over in my property editor, I'll have the option to apply the elastic that's up there in my object browser already. Here's my drop down list. I'll select the woven elastic. And again, I'll be mindful to update my grain to a weft grain. I'll simulate this once more, and that looks perfect. And of course, don't forget to refine your garment as always. So just to polish this one off, I'm going to select my patterns, change my particle distance down to a high resolution 5. Then I'll simulate it once more and zoom on in here a little bit. We can see how that garment fits and realism has come together really nicely. Perfect. Now let's look at some other applications. So when I simulate in this file, the shorts fall down because my pattern is larger than my waist measure. So let's go ahead and apply some elastic. First, I'll take her waist measure, and then in the 2D window, I'll create a pattern according to that measurement. Of course, you can create your own pattern according to the elastic width and height that you need. Now I'll go ahead and unfold the pattern along the center so that I have a complete pattern piece. And as I mentioned before, just be mindful of the grain direction. I'm going to check it with my texture editing tool just to make sure that it's perpendicular to the length of my elastic, which it is. Great. I can move on and arrange it on our avatar. And I'll use arrangement points to do this and nest it underneath my main waistband. Nice and cozy in there. So now the pattern is arranged. Let's go ahead and put it together and sew it all up. I'll do that in the 2D window, nice and easy. And of course, make sure I sew the sides together, and then it's ready to simulate. And even though we haven't applied the elastic yet, we do get an elastic effect from that smaller pattern piece. So my shorts are staying firmly in place. But let's go ahead and add the elastic, which of course I can find in my fabric folder. I just bring it into my objects browser, and then I can apply it to my selected pattern piece. I'll just drag and drop it down. Now when I simulate, the shorts will fit a lot more realistically. And don't forget to refine the gathering details by selecting all of your patterns and decreasing the particle distance down to 5, which of course is going to give you more definition and realism for your elastic expression. Beautiful. Now if I hide the avatar, we can see there's the elastic. It's being applied to the inside of the waistband. But we can also apply shearing along the pattern edges to refine this elastic expression even more. So I'll go ahead and select all of those edges, toggle it on. Simulate to take effect to those changes. And hide the avatar, and let's have a closer look at that expression. It's looking really great. Now we could stop here, but let's go ahead and turn this into a concealed waistband type. I'm just going to create a layer clone underneath and then go ahead and use sub layers in order to arrange all of this. So I can do that with my sub layering tool. I'll just connect all of these together, simulate to take effect to it, and it will be arranged into the correct order. Perfect. Now I'll just hide the avatar and have a closer look at the inside of the waistband again. With my thin textured view, we can see the front face of the fabric is flipped inwards. So I'm going to flip normal to update that. But if I simulate now, my beautiful arrangement is coming undone. So to address this, first I'll undo and then go ahead and use the sublayer option to update my sublayer from a plus to a minus. And then when I simulate again, everything's going to be arranged correctly. So just don't forget that step for concealed waistbands. Now I'll hide the top pattern so we can have a look. There's my elastic band sitting perfectly inside. Everything has come together exactly as it should. Beautiful. Now let's apply some elastic to other areas of this outfit. I'm going to use the binding tool to apply elastic along the top hem edge here to give it a nice cinched in puff top finish. And once that's applied, of course, you can set the desired width. I'm going to use 20 millimeters here, and then you can update your fabric type from fabric to elastic. And I'd like to use the knit elastic type, so I need to first bring this into the object browser. Now that's available here in my drop down. And of course, I must update my grain to a weft direction for elastic. Now, if I briefly hide the avatar, we can see that's nested perfectly and looks very much like an elastic finish, but we're not complete with the design. So next, I want that cinched in waist, so I'm going to update the length of the elastic. So at the moment, I'm going to take the underbust measure as a guide, and I can update the length over here. Now I just need to simulate to take effect to that, let it redrape. And we're getting that cinch in look, and it's already starting to look pretty good. But of course we can get much more realistic expression once we reduce the particle distance of the patterns. So if I select the elastic, we can see that it is already at a low particle distance. So I just need to update my main front pattern from 20 to 5 so I can get a look at the realistic fabric drape. And that's starting to look really great. But just like before, if we want to even further express this, we can add shearing along the pattern edges. So I'll select those, toggle it on, simulate again to take effect to it, and that looks really fantastic. Now, one last little detail, I'll update the color here. I've got the color books, but I'm going to use a bit of a color selector and then pull out a color with my color picker. That looks great. Okay, one more application for elastic in this outfit. Let's apply some to the sleeve here. So first of all, I'm going to extend my pattern edge. And I'll extend it by 20 millimeters, making sure to check on create internal line and mirror. Now let's also offset the pattern outline as an internal line as well. One more little step, let's quickly update the sewing as well. And briefly simulate to take effect to all of this. And just like last time, we'll be using our binding tool to apply binding to the pattern edge here. Now, you can decide on the width of your binding depending on the width of the elastic that you need. And of course, change the fabric type to elastic and make sure to update your grain direction to weft for all of your elastic applications. So now that's settled in there, I can see it's underneath. Now I'm going to fold my pattern up because I need this to be a turned hem type. I'll reduce the fold angle so it's nice and sharp. Sew this down, make sure my sewing type is turned, and reset the arrangement just to nest it back inside. Now we can simulate to take effect to that change. And then it's starting to look okay, but we do need to now change the length of our elastic, so I will do that now. and bring it down to 250 mils for my design here. Simulate, let it all settle down. And once that's done, just like earlier, the final steps to refine the pattern are to reduce its particle distance, bring it down to a high resolution 5. And if you want even more gathering effect, of course, then we can next add some shearing as well. So now that's settled down, I'll select the pattern edges, toggle on my shearing. And it's starting to look good. But if you're seeing any little collision issues, and I have just a little bit here, you are able to just give it a gentle pull, help it all come together neatly. And that's starting to settle down nicely. So let's zoom on out and have a look at our completed outfit with all of the elastic detailing. Beautiful. In CLO 7.2, it is possible to unfold multiple patterns at the same time. So before this update, it was necessary to select and unfold each pattern individually. Now you can just simply select the lines that you wish to unfold while holding Shift, and after that you can right click and find your unfold options, turning this task into something a lot more efficient. Another improvement is the new option to unfold the pattern without the internal lines. So in this particular style, I have a patch placed on one side of the dress. If I unfold this using the unfold or unfold symmetric options, the internal line of that patch will be replicated to the other side of the dress as well. There is a new option named Unfold Pattern Outline Only, and this will allow you to unfold your pattern without the internal lines. This is really useful in cases like this where you have patches, pockets and other details that will only exist on one side of the pattern. Just be mindful that this option doesn't keep the symmetric linked editing for your pattern. We've also made improvements to our clone as reference line feature. So as you can see here, I have a pattern. So to clone this pattern edge as a reference line, I select it, then I right click and I can find that option to clone as a reference line. Now this is going to enable me to still see the original pattern edge when I make changes to my pattern. So if I extend the hem edge here, enter a value, here is my original hem edge indicated by this reference line. Now one of the improvements that we've made is that you're now able to trace this out as an internal line using the trace tool. Simply select it and hit enter or right click to find that option. Now you're also able to use that original reference line to trace, to go back a step and replace as pattern outline, making the editing workflow a lot more efficient. And if you do want to go back to that extension, simply a matter of tracing out that reference line and selecting those edges and again replacing as a pattern outline. We've also improved the clone as reference line, so now that when you cut a pattern, the reference line will be included within all of those patterns. So now if I divide this pattern first by creating an internal line, and then I'll cut and sew. Now if I move these patterns apart, you can see that the reference line has been cloned across both, making it easier to go back to previous edits or just keep track of your changes. Another update is to our tracing tool and the ability to now trace out the half symmetric fold line. So I'm creating a pocket shape here with the internal line tool, and I'm now able to select the symmetric fold line as part of my shape and more easily trace that out as a pattern. So now I'll just select the center and unfold, and I now have a complete pattern piece. So tracing out details along the symmetric fold line is now possible and a lot more easier, hopefully adding more efficiency to your workflow. Now in 7.2, the pattern name position will change parallel to the grain line. This improvement makes it easier to view within the 2D window. Even if your grain line view is toggled off, you can still know the direction of your grain line by the pattern name position. By clicking the Edit Texture tool, we can rotate the grain line and you'll see that the pattern name follows the same position. Also, the position adjustment happens if we change the grain line direction within the property editor directly. And you can edit the grain line value. As you see, the pattern name always stays in line with the grain line. In 7.2, when you optimize your curve points, you will now have more control over the adjustment. So in previous versions, the optimal number of points was set automatically. And because it was automatic, if you didn't get the desired result, you would need to make manual adjustments to each of those curve points, which could be time consuming. So from version 7.2, well, you can still use the automatic adjustment and find the optimal number of points while maintaining as much of that original line shape as possible. You can now also have much more fine control over that adjustment, which we hope makes your work more efficient. To show you how this works, I'll grab the curve point editing tool. And as you can see in this pattern, there are many curve points, so let's see how this improvement can help to reduce them. So if you want to adjust the number of points in the same proportion across all of your pattern pieces, with the Transform Pattern tool, right-click into the background and select Optimize Curve Points. When this option is first opened, you'll see the optimal ratio that's automatically set, while it maintains the original line shape as much as possible. Now, if you want to change this, you can manually adjust the points by moving this bar, and you'll see the 2D window is displaying the result, so you can check it before you confirm. Now that looks good, I'll press OK. Now, if you just want to reduce the curve points for only one pattern, you can do that by using the Transform Pattern tool. Right-click on the pattern you would like to adjust and find the option to optimize curve points. We'll get that same pop-up window, and you can see in the preview in my 2D window, only that pattern will be adjusted. So you can use the slider to make the adjustment according to what you need, and then just press OK to confirm it. Now, what if you would just like to reduce the curve points for one particular area of the pattern, like perhaps along the neckline or along the armhole here? You can also do that. Just use your Edit Pattern tool, right-click on the segment that you would like to adjust, and you'll find Optimize Curve Points. We get that same pop-up window, and the 2D window preview is showing that it's only making adjustments to that segment. So make the adjustments that you need, and when you're happy, then you can press Reset if you would like to go back to the beginning, and you also have the option to confirm it or cancel. From version 7.2, we've now also added the option to set your notch position of your graded patterns to a fixed position. So you can see what that means. As I toggle through each of these sizes, note that the notch position is fixed, and we hope this will allow you to create more accurate patterns for production. So let's see how this works. First, I'll bring in a DFX pattern, and you'll see I now have notch position options displayed. So fixed will place all of the notches in the same position across each graded size according to the starting point of that line, and ratio is the same as the placement you're used to seeing in 7.1, where all notches are graded proportionally. So if I select fixed, notch as my option to demonstrate and select OK to confirm. Let's take a look at the pattern. So over here in my grading tab, we can see that I have 3 sizes, and if I zoom in on the armhole here and toggle through each size, you'll note that the notch position is fixed at 100 mils from the underarm across all of those grades. Now, if I take a look at other areas of the pattern, we can see the same is true. Each of those notches is remains in a fixed position across all of those grades. But I can already hear you asking, yes, it is also possible to set each notch individually. So now we're looking at the pattern with all notch positions set to ratio. So to fix notch grading for specific notches, grab your notching tool. And now in this example, a fixed notch is going to be required to maintain the gathering at the sleeve head. Notice that with the ratio grading, if I move through these sizes, the underarm notches no longer match, which is going to bring that excess into the underarm, which we don't want. So to change this, first of all, just click on your notch. And here in the Properties editor, you'll find the option to toggle on Fixed.
And now to compare, when I toggle through the graded sizing with my notch set to a fixed position, we can see that it doesn't move between those graded sizes. So we have a couple of new grading features that are available in print layout mode. So let's go there and I'll explain. So the first update is that in the property editor, along with the fabric roll width, we can also now set the marker length. So I have a number of grades for this style, so I'll go ahead and set the number of each grade that I would like to nest. I'll set the grain direction and define the roll width just like before. But notice here, I'm now also able to set the marker length. So in production, the fabric roll needs to match the marker for accuracy. So to improve this, you're now able to nest your patterns within a specified marker length. So now when I begin to nest, CLO will calculate the consumption and create a marker according to the length that I have defined. And when the number of patterns exceeds the roll length, then additional markers will be created, and that will happen automatically, as you can see here. Now, if I zoom in on the marker detail text, which runs along the top, it's giving information about the width, length, and the consumption for both of the markers that have been generated. The second improvement is the ability to randomize your graded sizing. You can turn on that display up in the 2D toggle menu, as you can see here, and you can also turn on the sizing text display, making it just a lot easier to navigate and easily differentiate your sizes in your print layout marker. Another grading update for 7.2 is the ability to copy and paste the grade rules for X and Y individually. So to do that, simply right-click and copy the grade rule, find the point that you want to apply it to, right-click, and under paste, you can now paste both values or X and Y individually. So if I now select X, that grade rule will apply along the X-axis only. And it works exactly the same if you want to do so along the Y-axis. So I'll copy, right-click and find paste and select the Y-axis. Now this improvement does also allow you to copy and mirror paste for your X and Y grade values individually. So I'll follow the same process. I'll first copy the grade rule, and this time I will find the point and mirror paste. And here you can see the options to paste together or on individual axis. So now I will select the X, and you can see that rule has applied. And over here, the same again, copy the rule and then find mirror paste. This time I'll paste it on the Y-axis. And one final grading improvement, you'll now be able to see your X and Y measurements for your graded nest in the 2D window as well as in the property editor. So in version 7.2, you'll also find we've improved the UI for the avatar editor to make it easier to create more naturally proportioned avatars. Some of you may have experienced moments of doubt when entering measurements into the avatar editor, wondering if you're going about it in the right way, especially when you're seeing a body shape that isn't smooth or natural. So we've improved the Avatar Editor UI to make it more intuitive and easier for you to adjust body shapes. So firstly, when we open up the Avatar Editor, you'll notice that checkboxes have been added to the right for some categories. These are measures that have the most impact on body shaping and proportion. So if any of these are missing or incorrect, you may not get the body shape that you want and you might see some deformed shapes. So to make this a lot easier for you to create natural body shapes in your desired size, we've added the function to let CLO automatically calculate these values and proportionally edit by unchecking these boxes. And I'll explain this as we go through and try out the improved interface. So firstly, in the total body category, which we see at the top of our avatar editor, you'll see a new item called proportion. At the moment it's grayed out and I have a checkbox over here. It'll be off by default when you first open the avatar editor, and in order to use it, you simply need to toggle it on. So let's do that now and see what this is all about. So now the option is available for me to edit, and if I have a look at this drop-down option, at the moment it's set to inseam, but you can also use CF neck to waist proportional editing. Now these are measures that are available down below. However, as they're the most important to proportional body editing, it's more intuitive to create these measures first, so we've put them in the total body category. Now, if you want some more information about these measurements, notice that there is an eye icon here next to proportion, and when you hover over this, it will give you more information about the inseam and CF neck to waist dimensions, as well as the information we just discussed. So if you do know your exact measure for your inseam or for your CF neck to waist, you can now enable proportion to enter those values here in total body. And just note that when you do, it will be disabled below. So if I select CF neck to waist, notice here the option below is grayed out because we've defined the value here, and demonstrate again the same applies for the inseam. So I'll go ahead now and give my inseam a random value. Let's go with 86. So what do you do if you don't know the value of one of these proportional measures? You can simply disable it. And as you can see, it will now ignore the previously entered value and automatically create appropriate inseam and CF neck to waist values based on what I've entered for my height. To demonstrate, let's increase the total height for our avatar, and we can see that those values for my inseam and my CF neck waist below are being edited proportional to the height of my avatar. So after entering the values for total body, you will need to select a type in the details category to add the remaining measures for your avatar. We recommend selecting the basic type and filling in those fields first, and then selecting an advanced human body or dress form type if you need additional fields. We'll explain the last type simple later, but for now, notice that only the basic type has the proportional checkbox added. So let's jump back into basic editing type and start adding in some of the missing measures. So here are my proportional editing checkboxes, but first I'm going to start by entering my circumference measures. So moving through one at a time, just neck, bicep, waist, high hip, and finally low hip. Now over here in my CF neck to waist, if I know the exact value, I'm able to input that information directly. If I don't have an exact measure, you can simply uncheck this and CLO will then calculate this measure based on the information you've already added. So notice that this has now been adjusted according to these circumference measures. So if I now start entering some values above, notice that my CF neck to waist measure is automatically being recalculated. And the reason this is happening is the CLO avatar is based on real human body scan data. So it creates natural proportions based on the values of each of these items. So even if you don't know the specific measures that are most important to the overall body shape, these items here with the check boxes, you can still create a natural body shape. So if you are experiencing issues when entering your avatar size, perhaps you don't have the precise values for some of these checkbox items, or you've been entering the incorrect measurements, we recommend that you turn off the checkboxes and use proportional editing. So I'll now turn these ones off and enter my total rise, allowing the neck to waist measure to be automatically calculated. So now let's have a look at that simple type in the newly added details category. So from the drop-down details list, I'll go into simple, and it is simpler than basic because you can enter values for only a few items. So that means even if you don't know all of the measures for the items in basic, you can still create an avatar with a natural body shape and minimal data. Also, when you select the simple details type, notice the total body shape is enabled, which was one of the improvements we've made from the previous version. And it was originally only enabled when the width was set to weight in total body. So in this version, we've improved it so that even if you select bust or under bust options for width, the total body shape is enabled in the simple details category. So you can take advantage of the total body shape feature, even if you don't know the weight. So let's select bust circumference option in the width and then select the simple in the details category. And when you do select simple, the total body shape is enabled, as you can see, so you can use any body shape that you want. And note that if you check proportion in the total body and then select CF neck to waist as an option, the simple type option will be disabled in the details. This is because the simple type has an inseam item, but not a CF neck to waist item. Use this option to create a total body shape you want by only entering the simplified values. And we hope that these UI improvements will make it even easier for you to use the avatar editor. In this version, we have also improved posing symmetrically using avatar X-ray joints. So to show you how this works, I'll bring in an avatar and switch to the X-ray joint view. Of course, you can use the hotkey Shift X as well. So now when we have our X-ray joints enabled, I'm now able to edit, and I'll zoom in here and perhaps use this elbow as an example. So once we click the joint, the icon above enables you to toggle on symmetry. So in version 7.1, we were able to rotate joints on either side of the body like this symmetrically. And in this version, we've added the ability to do this with the arrows as well. Hopefully this makes it a lot easier for you to create symmetrical poses for your projects. And one final but fun update for our avatar in this version is that you can now set the eye position or gaze very easily by selecting the avatar, and over in the properties you'll find this new item called eye control. So horizontal and vertical is just going to allow you to manipulate the gaze left and right, up and down. So to get an idea of what you can do with this, let's hop over into render mode, and I'll just refresh the project. It's a complete project with scenery and all, so it'll take a moment. And what we're going to do now is set up our camera view, and we want our 3D viewer and our render preview to be aligned. And I'll explain why that is in just a moment. Okay, so let's set up our avatar's gaze so that he's looking directly to camera. First, select the avatar and make your adjustments in the property editor. Notice that it's live updating there, of course, in the 3D window, but we don't see that refreshed in the render preview, and that's because we're changing the avatar's mesh. So make your adjustments with your camera view in the correct position in the 3D window. Once you've got it set to how you want it to look, and in this case, we're trying to have him look towards camera, and that looks good, then just simply update and then complete your render. So hopefully this makes it a lot easier for you to create more dynamic presentations, have fun, and get creative. Because as we can see in this example here, it creates a drastically different mood. Now I'm happy to share a feature I know many of you are going to love, and that's the ability to easily apply graphics over connecting seam lines as of version 7.2. So first, in order to use the feature, there does need to be a sewing relationship between the pattern and the internal line, as we have here. So I have a graphic already in my object browser. So to begin with, I'll drag and drop it onto my front pattern. As you can see, by default, the graphic is still only going to apply to the pattern that you've placed it on. So now you'll find in your graphics properties this new item to toggle on over Seamline. So turn that on first, and then using the sublayer tool, we need to set up our layers. So with this tool selected, all of the pattern outlines will just be outlined. Now you just need to select the patterns you want to connect. So my pocket to my front body. This icon in the center indicates the direction, plus is placing it on top, minus will place it underneath. And if you do need to remove it, just select and delete the arrow. So I'll just quickly reset these layers, and look, now we can see the graphic has seamlessly applied across both of those patterns. So let's have a look at another application, this time applying a graphic over multiple seam lines on the pant style. So just like before, but this time applying a graphic that needs to be placed across multiple patterns. First, I'll just drag and drop in a simple copy, resize it and reposition it. We can see it needs to cross over the pocket pieces as well as the front of the pants, as we can see here. Here we can use a similar process, starting with toggling on over seam line, and we can see the front and back joining seams already have the graphic displayed. For the pockets which sit on top, we do need to use, again, the sublayer tool to connect the pockets to the front and the back pants, with the plus symbol indicating that they are placed on top. On closer inspection, we can see that this is not a perfect alignment, and you may see this when you have patterns that have a natural slope, like the curvature of the side seam in the pant. In this case, disconnect as I am doing here, and rather use the previous process of placing an additional graphic and making the manual adjustments. We hope to improve the over seamline feature to enable you to use it with sloped patterns in future, but for now, we hope that this update makes your workflow a little smoother. From 7.2, you can now also view and add costs for your zippers in the bill of materials. So from the editor into the bill of materials, here is our BOM editor. So first, select the colorway you would like to cost. Here we've got all of our fabrics and trims, and in previous versions, the zipper information was not displayed. So here you'll notice that we have the zipper information for all of our components, and you now have the ability to add a cost for this item. And then once you update and refresh, you'll now have a more accurate reflection of your cost estimates. For the new version 7.2, there are also some updates to the Colorway editor that will make it easy for you to identify the item you have selected. So to demonstrate first, I will use the top stitch. So I have a top stitch here. Just note that this particular feature only works when the type is set to texture. So in order to more easily identify the top stitch, starting with this colorway, I double click the top stitch in the colorway editor, and here notice that it's now been highlighted in yellow in the 3D window. The same workflow also applies for the graphics. So here we have a tiger graphic applied to the handbag. If I double click here in the colorway editor, it will be highlighted in yellow in the 3D window. So we can also use this to identify trims as well as fabrics, and in this case it will be highlighted in the 3D viewer and also up in the object browser. So for this particular style, I have 2 fabrics in my object browser. Now if I go into my colorway and I want to identify this one, double click it and notice that it's highlighted also in blue in the object browser as well as in yellow in the 3D window. So we can also use this for trims. So in my bag style, I have a little bag stand down the bottom here. And if I double click the bag stand, it's highlighted in yellow, and up in the object browser, if I go into the trims tab, we can see that it's been highlighted here in blue as well. Another update in 7.2 that I know is going to make many of you very happy is that we have removed the minimum length for fur. So until now, our minimum length for fur was set to 4 millimeters, making it difficult to express a range of shorter fur types like flocking. And in this particular example, we can see if I come in a little bit closer, 4 millimeters is too long to realistically express this kind of material detail. So in the fur-based properties, you can now reduce the length of your fur all the way down to 0.1, which hopefully broadens the scope of fabrics and details that you're able to express with realism in CLO. Another feature that we have added for rendering in 7.2 is color mapping, which is going to help you get correct exposure for different fabrics. So first, in your render settings, you'll now find this color mapping option, and the first is Reinhardt with a default burn value of 1, which I'll now explain. So let's switch on interactive render and see what this is all about. So first of all, at this point, with our white fabric, we can see this area is overexposed, and this is similar to what we would see in a linear workflow from the previous version. But by adjusting this burn value, I'll bring it down to 0.5 and refreshing my render preview. We can see that overexposure has been corrected. So play with the settings depending on your project. The closer the burn value is to 0, the more it will correct for overexposure. Now let's check out HSV exponential. This is going to preserve the hue and color saturation rather than washing towards white. So when I refresh the render preview here, the effect that we see is going to be subtle. And notice that the creaminess of that leather bag is now coming back through because it's preserving the color. So depending on your project, you can now more easily correct for exposure and color with color mapping. So that is a wrap on 7.2. I hope you learned a lot during this webinar. We're really excited to share these new features and improvements with you. If you have any questions, feel free to share them in the comments section below, and one of our CLO designers will respond. You'll also find a link to a survey where you can provide us feedback on these new features in the description to this video link. And of course, to stay up to date with all of CLO's new features and lots of great learning resources, please don't forget to like and subscribe. So thanks again for joining and watching today.